It's that time of the year once again, ladies and gentlemen. The greatest spectacle in the sporting world has returned once again. The NFL regular season is about to start. It's just around the corner in September, and I am just enthralled. I am ecstatic, excited, any adjective you can think of. Cameron Washington here on the Falcon Fanatic, and today we're going to switch it up a bit. I'm not just going to talk about the Falcons. In this audio posting, I am going to predict the outcome of the AFC. I'm going to predict who's going to win each division, who's going to be the worst team in each division. I'm going to tell it all to you. It's a two-part audio posting, and in the second one, we'll be talking about the NFC and your hometown Atlanta Falcons. We're going to start out talking about the North. We're going to move to the AFC South, the East, and then the West. Stay tuned. First, we're going to talk about the AFC North. Cameron Washington here for the Falcon Fanatic. I'm going to read you off the records of the division last year, the AFC North. The Ravens came in first at 10-6, and as we all know, won the Super Bowl. The Bengals came in second at 10-6. The Ravens, however, had the tiebreaker at the end of the season. The Steelers, dismal performance toward the end of the season with all the turnovers. They came in at 8-8, and the Browns, not much is ever expected from the Browns, and they came in at 5-11. Let's start out talking about the Ravens. As I said, they finished the season 10-6, and they made the playoffs, spurred on by the emotional retirement decision of Ray Lewis. It catapulted them all the way to the Super Bowl. But now it's 2013. It's the 2013-14 NFL season, and they're not bringing back the same team. And the reason for that is the catastrophic repercussions of Joe Flacco's contract extension. Let me just read off some of the players that the Ravens lost this offseason. They lost Donnell Ellerbe, they lost Ray Lewis, they lost Ed Reed, Anquan Boldin, and Bernard Pollard. How do you replace that talent? You can go out and sign players, but it's not the same. These players have been together for a long time. Ellerbe, the youngest of the five that I just mentioned, and they sort of gel. They know how to work together. The new players that they gained, Chris Canty, Elvis Dumervil, and Visante Schenkel, all valuable pieces. I'm not arguing that. But you can't deny that they lost some leadership and some consistency when they lost the greatest linebacker probably that ever played the game, and Ray Lewis, and then Ed Reed is gone. So that's going to hurt. They also tried to help replace some of the missing pieces with the NFL draft. In the first round, they drafted Matt Elam out of the University of Florida. He's the safety. He was their 32nd pick in the draft, and he's supposed to be the heir apparent to Ed Reed. I don't see that happening. The Ravens lost both of their safeties. I believe Matt Elam's going to be the strong safety this season. The next player they drafted was a linebacker from Kansas State named Arthur B., and we don't know much about him yet. He hasn't proven himself. He's just a second-round draft pick. They still have Terrell Suggs, they still have Haloti Ngata, but like I said, they're missing a lot of pieces, and it's definitely going to hurt them this season. They drafted a defensive tackle, a defensive end, fullback, guard, the list goes on. But I definitely see a drop in the Ravens' performance this season because also Dennis Pitta is no longer with the team. I believe he got injured, and Anquan Boldin is now with the 49ers. Where is the offensive firepower coming from? The only really offensive threats that the Ravens have now is Ray Rice and Torrey Smith, and pretty much no one else. Now, the biggest three questions facing the Ravens this year are as follows. 1. Did Joe Flacco's contract screw up the Ravens? I'm going to answer that right now. I really think it did. And it's a trend that's going around the league. If you note, even Drew Brees, I don't see the Saints winning another Super Bowl. We'll get into this more later, but the $100 million quarterbacks strain the financial cap of their teams. I don't like the $100 million contracts. Look at what it's doing to the Ravens. How will Flacco play now that he's paid? I don't think it adds any pressure to him now that he's the $100 million man. The only reason I see his play dropping is because they weren't able to retain some of the pieces that they had when they made their Super Bowl run last year. The third question is, how well will the new members of the team replace last year's starters? Okay, let me start off. There's no replacing Ed Reed or Ray Lewis. I just don't see them playing as well on the defensive side. And That's part of the reason why I believe that the Bengals this season will actually surpass the Ravens in the AFC North. Let's move on to the Bengals now. They finished the division with a record of 10-6 last season. They almost won the division, but they did make it into the postseason, but left the dance the same way they did in 2012. One game and done with the Texans. They were bounced out by the Texans. Two of their notable off-season transactions, they re-signed Ray Malaluga and they signed James Harrison. That's really going to fortify their front and their pass rush. They already have a really, really fantastic defense. The question is, can Andy Dalton take the next step and lead his team to a division title? This year they drafted Tyler Eifert in the first round. Now they have almost kind of a plethora of weapons. They have two very valuable, serviceable tight ends, and of course the best receiver from the I believe it was the 2010 NFL draft, AJ Green. So it's all up to Andy Dalton. That's the biggest question that the Bengals have this offseason. Can he take the next step and lead his team to a division title? This is the perfect time to do it, because the Ravens they're falling back, they're faltering, they don't have all the pieces necessary to make a long run in the playoffs, I believe. So if there was any opportunity for the Bengals to take over this division, it would be now. And it's time for Andy Dalton to step up. How much of an immediate impact will Eifert have on this offense? The Bengals' offense was not one of the greatest last year. It was a mediocre offense at best. They don't have a great running game, but they do have A.J. Green. Obviously, Andy Dalton has solidified him as his number one target. Eifert, hopefully, sort of like Tony does for Roddy and Julio here in Atlanta, he can take some of the pressure off of A.J. Green, allowing him to get open and allowing this offense to flourish. The next two teams in the division are the Steelers and the Browns. And honestly, I don't see them improving much. The Steelers lost Mike Wallace this offseason. That's a huge loss. And who did they really gain? My biggest question facing the Steelers, and this is why I think they're going to come in third in the division, can they stay healthy? How will they replace Mike Wallace's production? And can they reduce the number of turnovers towards the end of last season that they had? I don't see them replacing Mike Wallace's production. Mike Wallace was their deep threat. They don't have a guy that can stretch the defense like he could last year. They still do have two very serviceable receivers in Emmanuel Sanders and the other guy they have, whose name fleets my mind right now, but there's no replacing Mike Wallace, ladies and gentlemen. Can they stay healthy? They lost James Harrison this offseason, and as we all know, that defense is getting pretty old. Troy Polamalu is always banged up. Big Ben's banged up. Rashard Mendenhall's gone. They're just getting old. I think it's time. It's about that time. Pretty soon they're going to start rebuilding, in my opinion, because the Steelers are just really, really old. And lastly in the division, the Browns. At a putrid 5-11 record last year, the Browns have a better chance statistically of improving than they do from getting worse, because I don't see how much worse you can get from 5-11. The big three questions with the Cleveland Browns the big two questions are, with the Ravens and the Steelers in situations of turmoil, can the Browns finish higher than either of these teams this year? That'd be a big step in the right direction. Brandon Weeden leads the Browns, and Trent Richardson, the quarterback and running back for the Browns. Those are the two star players on the team. Can Brandon Weeden step up? Can he step into that, not necessarily elite, but maybe second-tier quarterback level of play? Now we finally move on to wrapping up the AFC North. This season, the division, the AFC North, they face the AFC East and the NFC North. The NFC North obviously is going to be the tougher four games for them to play. They're going to have to, all the teams in this division are going to have to go against the Packers, the Bears, the Lions, and the Vikings. All four of those teams improved this offseason. Because of the losses that the Ravens suffered this offseason, I give a slight edge to the Bengals, and I believe that Eifert will give Dalton just enough offensive firepower to finally take the next step as an NFL quarterback. I have the Bengals finishing 10-6. I have the Ravens finishing 10-6, with the Bengals obviously having the tiebreaker. I have the Steelers finishing 9-7, and the Browns with one more win than last season, with a final record of 6-10.
This is our week. This is our house. Nobody comes in our house. As a man, it's them against us. Top of the AFC. It's ours to take. Let's take it. We're going to go on three. 1, 2, 3, let's go.
And on that note, we move on to the AFC South. This time I'm only going to talk about the top two teams because honestly, Tennessee and Jacksonville, I don't see them as being much of a threat. So I'm going to spend the majority of my time in this division talking about Houston and Indianapolis. Last season, the Houston Texans won the division with a record of 12-4. The Colts came in second place with a record of 11-5, and I believe they actually took one of the games away from the Texans. Tennessee ended up with a record of 6-10, and Jacksonville ended with a dismal 2-14. Let's start talking about Houston. Houston, they left the 2013 postseason just like they did in 2012, a win against the Bengals and a loss against the Patriots. The question is, how do they take the next step? How do they get to the next level and surpass the Patriots and make it past the second round of the postseason? Well, in a way, one way they're trying to do that is by making some off-season additions. Ed Reed, an all-pro safety, probably a future Hall of Famer, they signed him as their free safety to help solidify their back end. Unfortunately, they lost linebacker Connor Barwin, but this defense is still very solid, very stout. J.J. Watt, the Defensive Player of the Year last year. They got Brian Cushing and Ed Reed. They have leaders at every level of the defense. Through the draft, they acquired DeAndre Hopkins, a wide receiver, DJ Swearinger as another safety, and Sam Montgomery, a defensive end. I want you to understand how smart these draft picks were and how they correspond to the players that they already have on the team. Each of these 3 draft picks has someone at their position who can mentor them and make them into a great player. Let's start with DeAndre. DeAndre Hopkins is a wide receiver. He's obviously going to be the second wide receiver behind no other than Andre Johnson. Imagine that, being mentored by one of the best in the league right now, in Andre Johnson. Then we move on to DJ Swearinger, the safety. No other than Ed Reed will be mentoring him. Move on to Sam Montgomery, the defensive end. He's got J.J. Watt and Brian Cushing up there with him in the front 7. Those 3 guys are going to be fine. They're going to learn a lot this season. It's part of the reason why I believe the Texans are going to win this division again. The two big questions facing the Texans, though, are how will Hopkins finally be the second option that the Texans need at wide receiver to take some of the pressure off of Andre? How fast will he develop? How fast will he understand the playbook and all that stuff? Because let's face it, Andre's just going to always get double teams until DeAndre can prove that he's a serviceable second option and take some of the pressure off of him. And then the second question is, with all the additions they made this offseason through free agency and Ed Reed and then the draft with Hopkins, Swearinger, and Montgomery, can they finally go further in the playoffs? I mean, sky's the limit for this team. They've improved. I don't see them getting any worse, that's for sure. They're going to win the division, in my opinion, again. So it just depends on how well the new additions play. The next team in the division, and the team I think is going to end up in second place, is the Colts. They surprised everyone, just about everyone last year, as they made an emotional run into the postseason with their head coach being in the hospital for such an extenuous period of time. Unfortunately, this team was bounced by the Baltimore Ravens, who were also on an emotional high when not Ed Reed, but Ray Lewis announced that he'd be retiring at the end of this season. Notable offseason transactions for the Colts this offseason included the loss of Dwight Freeney, but they gained Ahmad Bradshaw, LaRon Landry, and Darius Hayward-Bay. The Colts automatically check in my book. They've improved. Darius Hayward-Bay helps stretch the secondary when they're trying to open up the passing game, and Andrew Luck is only going to get better. LaRon Landry is a fantastic safety, and he will help shore up the back end of the Colts defense, and Ahmad Bradshaw is going to help them improve their running game. In the draft, they drafted Bijan Warner, a defensive end. I don't quite remember what school he came from, but he's a very serviceable pass rusher, and he's going to help that team a lot. The big 3 questions for the Colts this season is, how will Andrew Luck fare in his second season? How big of an impact will the team's new acquisitions have? And can the Colts finally beat the Texans? These are pretty easy questions to answer. Andrew Luck. Reggie Wayne compared Andrew Luck to Peyton Manning in the way he approaches his practices and game situations. I have no problem believing that Andrew Luck is going to do just fine this offseason. I do not believe that a sophomore slump is coming for him. The new acquisitions on the team, we don't know yet. We don't know how the rookies are going to fare. They don't have exactly the same superstar players to mentor them as the Texans do. And it's for that reason that I just don't think the Colts are ready to surpass the Texans in this division. My record predictions in the AFC South. Assuming that the apocalypse isn't going to occur, I don't see the Titans or Jaguars as a legitimate threat to the AFC South title this season. Both the Texans and the Colts have upgraded their rosters from last season, but I believe that the Texans have a better roster with more seasoned veterans such as Ed Reed, Brian Cushing, and the monster in the middle, J.J. Watt. Moreover, each player selected in the first 3 rounds by the Texans will have a perennial Pro Bowler mentoring them. Hopkins has Johnson, Swearinger has Reed, and Montgomery has Cushing and Watt. The AFC South faces the AFC West and the NFC West this year, and I believe that the Houston Texans are going to finish 12-4 just as they did last season. The Colts will finish at 10-6, the Titans 7-9, and the Jaguars with another dismal season at 3-13. Now let's talk about the division that I'm most excited about in the AFC this season. That's the AFC East, with the Patriots and the Dolphins headlining the offseason. I'm not as concerned about the Jets or the Bills, so I'm not really going to even talk about them that much. They're in a rebuilding process. They're not going to be very good this year, and I see no feasible route in which they could possibly win the AFC East division or even make the playoffs. But first, let's talk about the Patriots. A 12-4 record is nothing new for Brady and Belichick, as that's what they finished with last season. And just about as they do every year, the Pats won the division and got a first-round bye. Unfortunately, the team was beaten by the Ravens, who were riding an emotional high all the way to a Super Bowl victory. How have the Patriots changed this offseason? Tom Brady is now missing his top 3 offensive targets. Rob Gronkowski is out with back surgery for the preseason. We don't know when he's going to be back. He hopes to be back week 1, but back injuries are always really hard to come back from. Aaron Hernandez, as we know, is locked up in prison right now for a murder charge, and Wes Welker is out. He moves from Tom Brady to another elite quarterback in Peyton Manning. So Brady has lost his top 3 offensive weapons, and honestly, I don't know how he's going to fare. That's one of the big questions. How in the world are they going to perform up to the expectations up there in Boston with their top 3 perennial offensive weapons just gone like that in an instant? I don't know. The Dolphins, what makes this situation worse for the Patriots is the Dolphins improved a great deal this offseason. They had a busy one. After placing second in the East with a record of 7-9 last year, owner Stephen Ross said, "Look, guys, I had enough of this. It's time to win some games." He broke out the checkbook in an attempt to bring some talent to Miami. I'm going to list all of the Dolphins' notable offseason transactions for you right here. They lost Jake Long, but they gained Mike Wallace. They lost Carlos Dansby. They gained Brent Grimes. They lost Reggie Bush. They gained Dustin Keller. They gained Donnell Ellerbe, and they gained Tyson Clabo. They're hoping that Tyson Clabo can replace Jake Long at the tackle position, and Mike Wallace is going to bring that explosive power to the offense. They also drafted Deion Jordan and Jamar Taylor. Deion Jordan is a defensive end out of Oregon. He's going to be put opposite of Cameron Wake, a fantastic pass rusher that the Dolphins have. And now the Dolphins have 2 great pass rushers to go after Brady in the 2 games that they face him in this division. Also, they signed Brent Grimes, an all-pro cornerback, I'm sorry, not all-pro, but a Pro Bowl cornerback formerly of the Atlanta Falcons. We're going to miss him here. He's definitely going to have an impact upon the Dolphins, and it's just going to be exciting to see who wins this division between the Dolphins and the Patriots. The big question the Dolphins have is, can they finally win the division with all this money that they spent this offseason? And how well will Ryan Tannehill play this year? I think that all the veterans that they signed this offseason should play just fine. But the question is Ryan Tannehill. Let's move on to the AFC East predictions. For the first time in what seems like an eternity, the Patriots might actually have some competition for the division crown. The Dolphins certainly are not penny pinching this offseason, and the Dolphins, in my opinion, actually have more talent on their roster. But I'm still going to pick the Patriots to win this division just because they have Tom Brady. I know what I'm getting from Tom Brady. I don't know what I'm getting from Ryan Tannehill. He's not been as consistent as Brady or any of the elite quarterbacks in the league. You know what you're getting from Brady. Tannehill is the X factor in determining who wins this division. I have the Patriots finishing with the same record they had last season at 12-4. The Dolphins come in at second with a record of 10-6. I do believe the Dolphins will make the playoffs this year. The Bills and the Jets finish with a record of 9-7 and 6-10 respectively. Finally, we move out to the AFC West. And this is not going to require much analysis on my part. I'm just going to tell you straight up, the Broncos are going to win this division. I see them and the Falcons as the 2 most prolific passing offenses in the league right now. Wes Welker, Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, That's incredible. That's an incredible trio of wide receivers. I'm not even going to go into the other three teams in the AFC West because I am positive that the Denver Broncos will win this division. I hope you enjoyed this coverage of the AFC on the Falcon Fanatic. Please come back for the NFC coverage in the second audio post.